Hey everybody, this is Kaizen from Golden Circle Games, and I have my very first deck tech for you to enjoy. This deck is based around Anhelo the Painter, a commander from the Streets of New Capenna pre-constructed decks. I've avoided calling this an upgrade guide as I've changed so many cards, only a handful of the original cards that came with the deck actually remain in there. I wanted to go more along the lines of a spell slinger deck as it's a little bit out of my comfort zone, and I wanted to give myself a bit more of a challenge with this one. Anhelo the Painter is a Grixis commander, so it's 1 blue, 1 black and 1 red for a legendary creature vampire assassin. He has death touch, power of 1 and toughness of 3. And he states the first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn has casualty 2. So casualty is a new mechanic in Streets of New Capenna, and it says as you cast that spell you may sacrifice a creature with power 2 or greater. When you do, copy the spell and you may choose new targets for the copy. So the aim of this deck is to copy spells. We want to use that casualty ability to copy as many spells as we can and just get as much value as we can. It's also to control the game, so protect ourselves basically until we can get the big splashy spells out and try and win the game on the spot really. There are some token creators in the deck, and that is to take full advantage of the casualty mechanic. So our win cons are big splashy spells that do direct damage to the player. Doesn't matter how many creatures they have on the board, we can target them directly with our spells and win the game from there. There is an extra turn spell in the deck, and if you can get that out, there's enough ways to copy it that you could get up to 5-6 extra turns possibly, and then that will give you enough time to create as many creatures as you can and then swing in for the win that way, or find those direct damage spells and win from there. The cost of this deck is currently set at $190 or €115. Kicking things off with everyone's favourite, it's your boy the Soul Ring. It's 1 mana to cast and you tap it, add 2 colourless mana. And then you've got the Arcane Signet. It's again 2 mana, tap to add 1 mana of any colour in your commander's colour identity. And then Felwar Stone for 2 mana, add 1 mana of any colour that a land an opponent controls could produce. Moving on, we've got the Dimir Signet. For 2 mana, you can pay 1 and tap it and add either a blue and black mana. And then we've got the Izzet Signet, again 2 mana, pay 1, tap it to add red or blue mana. And next, you've guessed it, it's the Rakdos Signet. Pay 2 mana, add 1 and tap for a black or red mana. Last but not least, we've got the Wayfarer's Bauble. It's 1 mana and you can pay 2 and tap it, sacrifice a Wayfarer's Bauble, search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So a good way to fix your mana in a pinch. First of the creatures we've got is Cormelia Glamour Thief. She's 1 generic, 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red, legendary creature vampire rogue, 2/4 with haste, and you can pay 1, tap, add blue, black, red, spend this mana only to cast instant and or sorcery spells, and when Cormelia Glamour Thief dies, return up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. So very handy to pay for all the instants and sorcery spells we have, but also the added advantage that when she dies we can return one of the sort of better spells that we have back to our hand so we can cast it and even copy it again. Then we've got the Dualcaster Mage, is 1 generic and 2 red for creature human wizard, a 2/2 with flash. And it says when Dualcaster Mage enters the battlefield, copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So we can flash this in and copy one of our own spells, or if there's a spell that one of our opponents casts and we like the look of it, we can again use this, flash this in and copy their spell as well. Then we've got the Goblin Electromancer, 1 blue, 1 red. Creature, Goblin Wizard, it's a 2/2. And it says instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So we're getting a discount on all the instant and sorcery spells we have in our deck, which is the main bulk of the deck. Next up, we've got the Wizards of Thay, but personally I would have called them the Wizards of Thray because there's 3 of them, but that's just me. It costs 3 generic and 1 blue. A human wizard, 3/3. It has Myriad, so when it attacks you create a copy for each opponent you have. And that's important because it says instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So if you attack with this, then instant and sorcery spells you cast at that time during combat are 4 less to cast, because if you have 3 opponents, there will be 4 on the field at the time. And very importantly, it says you may cast sorcery spells as though they have flash. So that means some of the bigger spells we have that are sorcery speed, we can cast in combat at that time with the discount. Next is Kess, Dissident Mage. She's 1 generic, 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red. Legendary creature, human wizard, 3/4. Has flying and says during each of your turns you may cast an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. If a card cast this way will be put into your graveyard, exile instead. So it just means we can double up our instant and sorcery spells. So we cast them once, then cast them again from the graveyard if Kess is out at the time. We like to do this with our bigger, splashier spells that do direct damage, or extra turn spells, and again, if we can copy them, we're getting a lot of value from that. Next, we've got the Manaform Hellkite, 2 generic and 2 red for a creature dragon, 4/4. Has flying, and it says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX red dragon illusion creature token with flying and haste, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast a spell. Exile that token at the beginning of the next end step. So it means we can create bigger creatures with our bigger spells. We can get damage in because they have flying as well, and haste, so we can attack with them the same turn that they're created, and we should be able to use them with a casualty ability as long as the spell we've used is at least 2 mana or more. Next, we've got the Poppet Stitcher for 2 generic and 1 blue. It is a creature human wizard, 2/3, and says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more creature tokens, you may transform Poppet Stitcher. Now we really want it for this side of the card because we're going to be creating 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, which we can use with the casualty ability. But the other side does say Poppet Factory. It's an artifact, and it says creature tokens you control lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 3/3. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may transform Poppet Factory. So if you do have a lot of creature tokens out and you want to buff their power a little bit, you can use this side, but generally we're going to stick it to the Poppet Stitcher side. And now we've got the Stormkiln Artist, creature dwarf shaman, 2/2. Stormkiln Artist gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control, but more importantly it has Magecraft and says whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, create a treasure token. So if we cast a spell and get to copy it, we actually create 2 treasure tokens with this. So getting mana back for the instant and sorcery spells we cast. So it's really good value in this card. And we've got Talrand Sky Summoner for 2 generic, 2 blue, legendary creature Merfolk Wizard, 2/2, and says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 2/2 blue drake creature token with flying. So very similar to the Poppet Stitcher, but we're creating 2/2 flies in the air. So again, can be used to swing in if we need to, but again, can be used for the casualty ability. Last but not least, we've got Rao Storm Conduit for 2 generic, 1 blue, 1 red. Legendary Planeswalker, comes with 4 loyalty, and he has a passive ability. It says whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Rao Storm Conduit deals 1 damage to target opponent or Planeswalker. You can +2 to scry 1, but the ability we really want is -2. It says when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Now onto the sorcery cards in the deck. First off, we've got Chain Reaction for 2 and 2 red. It states, Chain Reaction deals X damage to each creature where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. So if we're against an aggressive creature deck, then we can deal with that in a pinch using this card. Next we've got Clone Legion. It's 7 generic and 2 blue, and says for each creature a target player controls, create a token that's a copy of that creature. So if we can copy this spell 2 or 3 times, we can copy every single player's creatures, and then we can use them for the casualty ability, or if there's enough creatures on the board, we can just swing in for the win. So it's one of the sort of more janky win cons in the deck. Another win con we have is Crackle with Power. It's XXX and 2 red, and says Crackle with Power deals 5 times X damage to each of up to X targets. So if we can get X up to 3, then at least we can deal 5 times 3 damage to each of our opponents. So that's 15 damage to each of our opponents. And again, if we can copy this, then each opponent will be taking 30 damage out of nowhere, which can be pretty devastating. Next, we've got Drawn from Dreams for 2 and 2 blue. It says look at the top 7 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of the library in a random order. So if we can copy this, then we're looking at 14 cards from our deck, trying to find those win cons, or just trying to find some way out of a certain situation that we find ourselves in. Now we've got another win con here with Exsanguinate for X and 2 black. Each opponent loses X life, you gain life equal to the life lost this way. So again, if we can copy this and put enough mana into it, and all of our opponents are losing a significant amount of life, and then we'll be gaining that life as well, so can swing the game firmly in our favour. And we've got Feed the Swarm for 1 generic and 1 black. It says destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. So it just gives us a bit of removal, not only for creatures, but some problem enchantments as well. And if we can copy this, again, we're going to be taking a couple of things out for 2 mana, so it's not a bad return. We've got another win con here in Jaya's Immolating Inferno for X and 2 red. It is a legendary sorcery, so we'll have to have either our commander out or Planeswalker, but generally we'll have our commander out as we want to copy the spell, because it says Jaya's Immolating Inferno deals X damage to each of up to 3 targets, so we can target our opponents directly. So if we can put enough into X and copy this, again, we're going to be dealing a lot of damage out of nowhere. Now we've got Make an Example for 3 generic 1 black, and says each opponent separates the creatures they control into 2 piles. For each opponent, you choose one of their piles. Each opponent sacrifices the creatures in their chosen piles. Piles can be empty, so it does give the players a choice, but we can get around certain effects with them having to sacrifice the creatures. So it can be a good way to remove some problem creatures. And we've got Ponder just for 1 blue. It says look at the top 3 cards of your library, put them back in any order you may shuffle, and then draw a card. So just looking to see what's coming up. If we like it, we can keep those cards on top and draw one of them, or if we don't like what we see, just shuffle them up and draw a card. So good either way, really. Next up, we got River's Rebuke for 4 generic and 2 blue, and it says return all non-land permanents target player controls to their owner's hands. So if we can copy this enough times, we'll just be slowing down our opponents so much that it will give us enough time to either swing in for the win or find our win cons from our deck. Talking about finding our win cons, we've got Solve the Equation for 2 generic and 1 blue, and it says search your library for an instant or sorcery card, reveal it, put it into your hand and shuffle. So great just to find a certain card in a certain situation that we need, or if we want to go for the win, we can find one of those win cons and try and cast it from there. Last but not least, we've got Time Warp for 3 generic and 2 blue, and simply states target player takes an extra turn after this one. So again, if we can get this copied, this is our extra turn spell in the deck. We can get it copied, again we can take enough extra turns, and there's ways of getting out of the graveyard so you can keep casting it again. It doesn't go infinite, but you're going to get enough extra turns in some situations where you're going to be winning the game. Moving on to the instance of the deck, which is the biggest bulk of the deck, starting off with a little chat for 1 generic and 1 blue. It has casualty 1, so you can sacrifice a creature with power 1 or greater, and when we do, we can copy this spell. And it says, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other on the bottom of your library. So a good draw spell for only 2 mana, especially if we can copy it. Next we've got Ether Sprouts for 3 generic and 2 blue. And it says for each attacking creature, its owner puts it on top of or bottom of their library. So it gives us protection from those big creature decks. It can be quite devastating for those creature decks because they don't go back into their hand for them to recast. They actually have to put them on the top or bottom of their library. So really good protection for us from aggressive attacking creature decks. And now we've got Anticipate for 1 generic and 1 blue. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So again, just looking a lot of cards in our deck just to find those important cards we need to swing the game in our favour. Now we've got Bedevil for 2 black and 1 red. It says destroy target artifact, creature or planeswalker. So good target removal for a variety of different card types. So next up we got Big Score for 3 generic and 1 red, and it says as an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card, and it says draw 2 cards and create 2 treasure tokens. So if we copy this, we only have to pay that additional cost once, so just discarding 1 card, but we will be drawing 4 cards and creating 4 treasure tokens. So really good card in the deck for card draw, and it essentially is free if we can copy it because we'll be creating 4 treasure tokens. Next, a classic draw spell in Brainstorm for 1 blue, and it says draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. Now we've got some good removal in Chaos Warp for 2 generic and 1 red, and it says the owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, they put it onto the battlefield. So it can get rid of a problem permanent, so any card on the battlefield, but they can then get something worse from the top of the library. But it's the risk you take, and it can be quite exciting to see what the person gets off the top of their library. Next we've got a classic. It's Counter Spell for 2 blue. Not much to say about this one, it explains itself. Counter target spell. And now we've got Deadly Dispute for 1 generic and 1 black, and it says as an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw 2 cards and create a treasure token. Again, if we can copy it, only paying that additional cost once, and drawing 4 cards and creating 2 treasures. So another really good draw spell, and it pays for itself. We've got another draw spell in Dig Through Time for 6 generic and 2 blue. It does have Delve, so each card you exile from your graveyard while casting this spell pays for 1 generic. So it can cost just 2 blue. And it says look at the top 7 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So it's basically an instant speed drawn from dreams. But again, a really good way to look at your library and draw some cards for a cheap cost. Now we've got Electro Dominance for X and 2 red, and it says Electro Dominance deals X damage to any target, so you can go to someone's face with this. You may cast a card with converted mana cost X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So we are doubling up here, so we're doing damage to something and we're casting a card, so we're not necessarily wasting our mana with the X cost. And we've got Frantic Search for 2 generic and 1 blue. Draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. Untap up to 3 lands. So again, if we can copy this, we are getting the card draw, and we are actually up mana because we will be untapping up to 6 lands if we can copy this spell. So yeah, really good spell to have. Next up, we've got the Maestro's Charm for 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red, and it says choose 1. Look at the top 5 cards of your library, put one of those cards into your hand and the rest into your graveyard, or each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life, or Maestro's Charm deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Just to let you know, when you do copy the spell, you have to stick with the original choice you've made. You can't choose a new choice for that spell.
Same with Mystic Confluence for 3 generic and 2 blue. It says choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. So counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. Return target creature to its owner's hand and draw a card. So just to let you know, if you do copy the spell, the copy still has to have valid targets on the battlefield for it to still go off. So if you counter a target spell, use that mode and then copy it, and then there's nothing to counter on the stack, then that copy will just fizzle. So just be really careful when you choose the modes and you want to copy it. Just be wary of the choices you make. And a bit more simple with this one, it's just negate for 1 generic and 1 blue, and it simply says counter target non-creature spell. Now we've got Opt as a cheap draw spell, just for 1 blue, and it's scry 1 and draw a card. And Reality Shift for 1 generic and 1 blue. It says exile target creature, its controller manifests the top card of the library. So it says that player puts the top card of their library onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature. If it's a creature card, it can be turned face up at any time for its mana cost. And another bit of removal here in Resculpt for 1 generic and 1 blue. Exile target artifact or creature, so a bit more flexibility there. And it says its controller creates a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. Now we've got Risk Factor for 2 generic and 1 red. It says target opponent may have Risk Factor deal 4 damage to them. If that player doesn't, you draw 3 cards. So if we can copy this enough times, it could get up to a big amount of damage so that you can get those 3 cards from a target opponent. You can jumpstart it from your graveyard at a later point in time. So later on, when the life totals are a little bit lower, you can jumpstart this from your graveyard, and 9 times out of 10 you're going to be getting the cards. So a really good card draw card here. You've got Rotten Reunion for a single black mana. It says exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. So really good for a bit of graveyard hate here. And again, you can flash this back for 1 and a black later on in the game. So really good to get those problem creatures out of people's graveyards, and you're creating a 2/2 zombie creature token with Decayed, so can help fuel the casualty ability. And then we've got Run Out of Town for 3 generic and 1 blue. It says the owner of target non-land permanent puts it on the top or bottom of their library. So again, can deal with a troublesome target permanent that someone has that may be disrupting your game. Next we've got Sublime Epiphany for 4 generic and 2 blue. It says choose 1 or more, counter target spell, counter target activated or triggered ability, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, and target player draws a card. So again, just need to be wary that when you copy the spell, you need to have valid targets, otherwise that copy will fizzle. But it's just such a versatile card and can be used in a variety of different situations. Next up, we got Supreme Will for 2 generic and 1 blue. It says choose 1, counter target spell unless its controller pays 3, or look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So just a bit of a flexible spell. Either use it as a counter or sifting through your library to find the more important cards in the deck. And we got Thirst for Discovery for 2 generic and 1 blue, and it says draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard a basic land card. So we can copy this and be drawing 6 cards and discarding 4. But again, a good way to sift through the library and find what you need for a certain situation. And we got another draw spell in Thrill of Possibility for 1 generic and 1 red. It says as an additional cost to cast a spell, discard a card and draw 2 cards. But again, if we can copy it, only paying that additional cost once. So drawing 4 cards for 2 mana, not a bad return. And then we've got a bit of a different counter spell in Tybalt's Trickery for 1 generic and 1 red. It says counter target spell, choose 1, 2 or 3 at random. Its controller mills that many cards, then exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card with a different name than that spell. They may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then they put the exile cards on the bottom of their library in a random order. So just a really good card for Commander. You can target yourself if you want to try and hit a bigger spell, especially if you've used those cards that puts the cards back on top of your library. But yeah, just a really fun counter spell, really. And then we've got Unexpected Windfall for 2 generic and 2 red. Very similar to the big score, it's exactly the same, just a slightly different casting cost. And it says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card, draw 2 cards and create 2 treasure tokens. So again, really, really good for drawing those cards and creating treasure tokens, especially if you can copy it. And the last 2 instant cards we've got Village Rites for 1 black. It says, as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature. So draw 2 cards. So again, if we can copy this, only paying that additional cost once. So drawing 4 cards for 1 mana, not a bad return. And we've got Whirlwind Denial for 2 generic and 1 blue. It says, for each spell and ability your opponents control, counter it unless its controller pays 4. So if someone's going off and the stack's really, really big, you just whack this Whirlwind Denial on top, and it can be really devastating for one of your opponents who's looking to go off in a certain turn. Now, we've only got a few enchantments in the deck, but we do have some really juicy ones. Starting off with Cryptic Pursuit for 2 generic, 1 blue, 1 red. It says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, manifest the top card of your library. So put that card onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature. Turn it face up anytime for its mana cost if it's a creature card. And it says, whenever a face down creature you control dies, exile it. If it's an instant or sorcery card, you may cast that card until the end of your next turn. So we can use these manifested creatures as fodder for our casualty ability, and then if it's an instant or sorceries card, we can still cast it. So really, really good card for this deck. And then we've got Double Vision for 3 generic, 2 red. And it says that whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So again, copying our spells, our first spell we cast each turn for free. So don't even have to use the casualty ability on our commander. And since it's exactly what we're trying to do in the deck, it's a really good enchantment. And for a bit of fun, we've got a Shark Typhoon for 5 generic and 1 blue. And it says, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. It does have cycling for X, 1 generic and 1 blue. And it says, when you cycle Shark Typhoon, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying. So we can use that in a pinch if we need to, but we're trying to hard cast this and create as many flying sharks as we can and threaten the board with our flying sharks in the air. And the last one we've got is a saga. It's the Mirari Conjecture for 4 generic and 1 blue. So in the first level, we will return an instant card from our graveyard to our hand. Second, we will return a target sorcery card from our graveyard to our hand. And a really powerful effect. Third, until end of turn, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. So if we've got enough mana and enough cards in our hand, we can really, really go off in this turn, copying every spell that we cast. Now I'm going to whiz through these lands because there's nothing really in here that has an amazing ability. So we've got Ash Barrens, so you can tap it to add 1 generic mana, or it's got basic land cycling for 1, so you can pay 1, discard this card, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand and shuffle. So if we need to fix our mana, this is a really good way to do it. Then we've got Cascade Bluffs, so you can tap it to add 1 generic, or if you add a blue or a red and tap it, you can double it up, so add either blue blue, blue red, or red red. And we've got a Choked Estuary, so it says, as Choked Estuary enters the battlefield, you may reveal an island or swamp card from your hand. If you don't, Choked Estuary enters the battlefield tapped, and you can tap it and add either a blue or black mana. And we've got a good old commander staple in Command Tower, so tap it, add 1 mana of any colour in your commander's colour identity. And we've got Crumbling Necropolis, so it enters tapped, but you can add either a blue or black or red mana to your mana pool. And Darkwater Catacombs, so pay 1 and tap it to add both a blue and black mana. We've got an Evolving Wilds. It says tap, sacrifice Evolving Wilds, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, taps and shuffle. So again, good for fixing our mana. An Exotic Orchard, tap, add 1 mana of any colour a land that opponent controls could produce. And a Foreboding Ruins. As Foreboding Ruins enters the battlefield, you may reveal a swamp or mountain card from your hand. If you don't, Foreboding Ruins enters the battlefield tapped, and tap it to add either a black or red mana. We've got a Frostboil Snarl. So as Frostboil Snarl enters the battlefield, you may reveal an island or mountain card from your hand. If you don't, Frostboil Snarl enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it to add either a blue or red mana. We've got a Grixis Panorama. You can tap it to add a generic mana to your mana pool, or pay 1 and tap it, sacrifice Grixis Panorama, search your library for a basic island, swamp or mountain card, put it onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. And we got Maestro's Theatre. So it says when Maestro's Theatre enters the battlefield, sacrifice it. When you do, search your library for a basic island, swamp or mountain card, put it onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle, and you gain 1 life. So we do have a dual face land here, so you can either put this down as a Riverglide Pathway, which is tapped to add a blue mana, or the alternate side is the Lava Glide Pathway, which taps to add 1 red mana. And we've got Smouldering Marsh. This is Smouldering Marsh enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands, and you can tap it to add either a black or red mana. And we've got Sunken Hollow. And this is similar to the Smouldering Marsh, where it says Sunken Hollow enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands. You can tap it to add either a blue or black mana. And then last of the non-basic lands, we've got Temple of Epiphany. So Temple of Epiphany enters the battlefield tapped, but when Temple of Epiphany enters the battlefield, scry 1, you can tap it to add either a blue or red mana. And we've got Waterfront District. Waterfront District enters the battlefield tapped, tap it to add a blue or black mana. Or you can pay 2 blue, 1 black, tap it and sacrifice it to draw a card. So really good to use in a pinch. And then for basic lands, we have 10 basic islands, 5 basic mountains, and 3 basic swamps. And that's everything. So that is my deck for Anhelo the Painter. If you enjoyed it, please do leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I will put the deck list in the description below, so if anyone wants to see it there. We do have a Discord, so if anyone wants to join, please do. We like playing games on Spell Table, just discussing Magic in general. So if you have Discord, please do consider joining us there. I did contract a cold about halfway through, so if my voice has changed about halfway through, it's probably because I have a cold. It probably sounds better, to be honest, so every time I do one from now on, I'll try and contract a cold and go from there. But yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.